He was born a prince, but his cradle was not one of gilded luxury. Smuggled out of a collapsing homeland in a makeshift crib fashioned from a humble orange crate, he began life as an exile. His family was shattered by political upheaval, his sisters entwined with the darkest forces of history, and his mother confined to the cold walls of an asylum. From these ashes of loss and displacement, he forged an extraordinary path, rising to become the longest-serving consort in British royal history. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was a man of stark contradictions, a figure both revered and feared, a blend of regal dignity and irreverent humor, whose life was shaped by war, sacrifice, scandal, loyalty, and an enduring love that spanned nearly a century. This is his story, not one of quiet palace corridors, but of survival, duty, and a relentless drive to carve his place in a world that often sought to define him. On June 10, 1921, in a villa called Mon Repos, on the sun-drenched Greek island of Corfu, a boy named Philip was born into the royal house of Glucksburg, a lineage that traced its roots across the monarchies of Greece and Denmark. But the fairy tale of royal birth was absent. Greece was a nation teetering on the edge of chaos, its monarchy battered by political instability and the fallout of the Greco-Turkish War. Philip's father, Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, was a military officer whose decisions during the conflict drew accusations of treason. His mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, was a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria, a woman of quiet strength whose own struggles with mental health would soon unravel the family. When Philip was just 18 months old, the Greek monarchy collapsed, and his family was forced into exile. The escape was clandestine and perilous. A British warship, HMS Calypso, spirited them away under cover of darkness. To ensure the infant prince's safety, his mother concealed him in a fruit crate, a makeshift bassinet that symbolized the fragility of their circumstances. This was Philip's first journey, not one of triumph, but of survival. Before he could utter his first words, he had lost his homeland, his security, and the stability of a royal upbringing. Philip's early years were a tapestry of dislocation, woven with threads of loss and adaptation. The family settled briefly in Paris, living modestly in a borrowed home in the suburb of Saint-Cloud. But the strain of exile fractured their unity. Princess Alice's mental health deteriorated, and Prince Andrew, disillusioned and detached, drifted into a life of leisure in Monte Carlo. Philip, the youngest of 5 children, was left to navigate a world of uncertainty, shuttled between relatives, boarding schools, and near strangers across Europe. His 4 older sisters, Margarita, Theodora, Cecilia, and Sophie, each married German aristocrats, many of whom aligned with the rising Nazi regime. These marriages tethered Philip's bloodline to the Third Reich, a connection that would haunt him later in life. The sisters' husbands held high ranks in Hitler's inner circle, and their choices cast a shadow over the family's legacy. For a boy already adrift, these ties added another layer of complexity to his identity. Tragedy struck in 1937, when Philip was just 16. His beloved sister Cecilia, her husband, their 2 young sons, and an unborn child perished in a horrific plane crash in Ostend, Belgium. Cecilia was heavily pregnant and in labor, prompting the pilot to attempt an early landing in dense fog. The plane collided with a factory chimney, killing everyone on board. Philip, studying at Gordonstoun School in Scotland, was summoned to the funeral in Darmstadt, Germany. In a stark image of grief, the teenage prince walked alone behind the caskets, surrounded by Nazi officials and a sea of mourners. The loss was a searing blow, one that deepened the solitude of his formative years. By then, his family had all but dissolved, Princess Alice, diagnosed with schizophrenia, had been institutionalized in a Swiss sanatorium after a breakdown. Prince Andrew, living a playboy's life on the French Riviera, was a distant figure, offering little guidance or warmth. Philip, a prince in title only, was raised by a patchwork of guardians, teachers, distant uncles like Lord Louis Mountbatten, and the austere discipline of boarding schools. Yet from this fractured childhood, a resilience was born, tempered by adversity and sharpened by independence. The outbreak of World War II in 1939 gave Philip a purpose that his rootless youth had lacked. At 18, he enrolled at the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, where his natural aptitude and fierce determination set him apart. Graduating as the best cadet in his class, he joined the Royal Navy and served with distinction through some of the war's most grueling theaters. His service took him to the Mediterranean and the Pacific, where he faced enemy fire with quiet courage. During the Battle of Cape Matapan in 1941, he manned a searchlight aboard HMS Valiant, illuminating Italian cruisers for British gunners, a role that earned him a mention in dispatches for bravery. Later, he served on destroyers and helped coordinate vital convoys, proving himself a capable and resolute officer. The war was personal as well as professional. While Philip fought for Britain, his sister's husbands, his brothers-in-law, served the Nazi regime on the opposing side. This familial divide was a bitter irony, a reminder of the tangled loyalties that defined his early life. Yet Philip's commitment to his adopted country never wavered. The Navy became his anchor, a place where he could prove his worth beyond the constraints of his royal title or troubled heritage. In the summer of 1939, during a royal visit to Dartmouth, an 18-year-old Philip met a 13-year-old Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen of England. The encounter was brief but fateful. Tasked with entertaining the young princess and her sister, Margaret, Philip impressed Elizabeth with his athleticism, charm, and unpolished confidence. While others saw a rough-edged naval cadet with a complicated lineage and German connections, Elizabeth saw a man of substance, a protector, a doer, a spark in a world of protocol. Their connection deepened through letters exchanged during the war, a quiet romance blooming amid the chaos of global conflict. To marry Elizabeth, Philip faced a monumental choice. He had to renounce his Greek and Danish titles, convert from Greek Orthodoxy to Anglicanism, and adopt British citizenship. He took the name Philip Mountbatten, borrowing the anglicized surname of his mother's family. For a man who had already lost so much, his homeland, his family, his roots, this was another sacrifice, but one he made willingly for love. The engagement was announced in July 1947, and the wedding, held on November 20th, 1947, at Westminster Abbey, was a global spectacle, broadcast by radio to 200 million listeners. It was a moment of post-war hope, a symbol of renewal for a battered Britain. Yet the celebration was tinged with pain. None of Philip's sisters attended the wedding. Their husbands' Nazi affiliations were deemed too toxic in a Britain still scarred by war. The absence of his family underscored the isolation that had defined much of his life. On the morning of the wedding, Philip made two quiet gestures of devotion. He quit smoking cold turkey, knowing Elizabeth disapproved of the habit, and he presented her with an engagement ring crafted from diamonds taken from a tiara owned by his estranged mother, Princess Alice. The stones, cut and set to his design, were a poignant offering from a prince with no fortune, a testament to his resourcefulness and commitment. When King George VI died in 1952, Elizabeth ascended to the throne at 25, and Philip's life changed irrevocably. Overnight, he became the consort to the monarch, a role that required him to walk 2 steps behind his wife, kneel to her in public, and subordinate his ambitions to her duties. For a man of his era, proud, independent, and shaped by military discipline, the position was a profound challenge. "I'm the only man in the country not allowed to give his children his name," he once remarked, bristling at the decision to retain the House of Windsor over his adopted surname, Mountbatten. The compromise, years later, that their descendants would bear the name Mountbatten-Windsor was a hard-won victory. Philip's personality was ill-suited to deference. He was blunt, often to the point of controversy, with a wit that could cut as sharply as it entertained. His public remarks became the stuff of legend and infamy. During a 1986 state visit to China, he quipped, "If it has 4 legs and it's not a chair, if it has 2 wings and it flies, but it's not an aircraft, and if it swims and it's not a submarine, the Cantonese will eat it." He coined the term dauntipedology to describe his knack for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. These gaffes, often rooted in his irreverent humor, masked a deeper truth. Philip was a man who refused to be tamed by protocol. Yet, behind the headlines, he was a force for modernization. He championed the televising of the monarchy, culminating in the broadcast of Elizabeth's 1953 coronation. He permitted the groundbreaking 1969 documentary Royal Family, which offered an unprecedented glimpse into their private lives. A passionate advocate for science, technology, and conservation, he foresaw the importance of environmental stewardship decades before it became mainstream. His Duke of Edinburgh's award, launched in 1956, empowered millions of young people worldwide to develop skills, resilience, and confidence through outdoor challenges and community service. In an era of stifling tradition, Philip was a restless innovator, asking tough questions and pushing boundaries.
As a father, Philip was a paradox, devoted yet distant, demanding yet flawed. To his eldest son, Charles, he was often cold and critical, struggling to connect with a sensitive, artistic boy who seemed at odds with his own pragmatic, action-oriented nature. When Charles was born, Philip reportedly remarked, "He looks like a plum pudding," a quip that set the tone for their strained relationship. During Elizabeth's 30-hour labor with Charles, Philip played squash and swam, a decision that reflected his discomfort with emotional vulnerability. To his daughter, Anne, he was warmer, admiring her tenacity and no-nonsense attitude, traits that mirrored his own. With Andrew and Edward, he was more relaxed, but the shadow of his expectations loomed large. Philip's parenting was shaped by his own upbringing, devoid of warmth, rooted in duty. When Charles hesitated over his engagement to Diana Spencer in 1981, Philip issued a stern ultimatum: marry her or end the relationship. The letter, meant to protect the monarchy's reputation, pressured Charles into a marriage that would unravel spectacularly. The fallout, Diana's struggles, the public divorce, and her tragic death in 1997 cast a long shadow. Yet in the aftermath, Philip showed a quieter side. During Diana's funeral, he walked beside William and Harry, offering stoic support to his grieving grandsons, shielding them from the world's gaze. In moments of crisis, Philip's instinct was to protect, even if his methods were imperfect. Rumors of infidelity trailed Philip for decades. His name was linked to actresses like Pat Kirkwood and other glamorous figures, fueled by his charisma and the long absences required by naval and royal duties. Yet no credible evidence ever emerged. His private secretary, Mike Parker, once said, "He could flirt, but he never strayed." Philip himself dismissed the speculation with characteristic humor. "With security guards following me everywhere, how would I ever get away with it?" His loyalty to Elizabeth, though tested by the strains of their roles, remained a cornerstone of their marriage. Even in his later years, Philip's vitality was remarkable. At 96, he maintained a grueling schedule, attending over 100 public engagements annually. He flew planes, logging over 5,000 hours as a pilot, and embraced hobbies like painting and writing. A man of frugality, he once had a pair of trousers, worn for 52 years, tailored to fit his aging frame. He preferred coffee to tea, distrusted waste, and approached life with a restless curiosity. In an extraordinary twist, Philip became a deity to a cargo cult on the South Pacific island of Tanna in Vanuatu. The tribe believed he was a divine figure, a descendant of ancestral spirits. Rather than ridicule their faith, Philip responded with grace, sending signed photographs and maintaining a respectful correspondence. For a man so often sidelined by the monarchy's hierarchy, this adulation was perhaps a quiet irony he savored. At the heart of Philip's story was Elizabeth, the woman he affectionately called Cabbage. Their marriage, spanning over 7 decades, was a partnership of opposites, her restraint balanced by his candor, her duty tempered by his pragmatism. They shared a private world of laughter, sharp-witted banter, and unspoken understanding. Through wars, abdications, family crises, and the relentless scrutiny of the modern age, their bond endured. Not always tender, but always resilient. In 2021, as Harry and Meghan's Oprah interview sparked global controversy, Philip's name was briefly entangled in speculation over alleged remarks about their child's skin tone. Those who knew him, friends, aides, and family, rejected the claims, emphasizing his bluntness was not bigotry. At 99, frail and hospitalized, Philip remained above the fray, his focus fixed on his family and his queen. On April 9, 2021, just weeks before his 100th birthday, Prince Philip died peacefully at Windsor Castle. His funeral, held amid the constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic, was understated at his request. No pomp, no eulogies, just a simple service reflecting his life of service. He was laid to rest in the royal vault at St. George's Chapel, a sailor's hymn echoing through the quiet. Philip's legacy is one of paradoxes, a prince without a country, a hero sidelined by protocol, a consort who reshaped the monarchy while chafing at its constraints. He was a man who spoke too freely, yet guarded his deepest truths, who broke molds while upholding tradition. Above all, he was Elizabeth's steadfast partner, a rebel with a wry smile who lived not for the crown, but for the woman who wore it. In the end, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was not defined by the titles he renounced, or the scandals that swirled around him. He was defined by his choices, to fight, to love, to serve, and to endure. His was a life that didn't fit neatly into history's pages, but one that left an indelible mark, quietly and stubbornly, on the world he helped shape.